U.S. Congressman Sam Liccardo joins this episode to dive into the housing affordability crisis and his bipartisan Housing Supply Act. We talked about why the U.S. is struggling with housing supply and how ADUs or backyard homes could be a game changer, and why new federal support for financing these units could unlock more affordable housing.
I actually put together a book of ideas that I thought Republicans and Democrats would actually agree on to tackle our biggest challenges. And of course, housing by far among the largest. There's no question that the power of NIMBYs has constrained the ability of cities to do what they need to do to accommodate a growing population. We've got to get Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac into the game of helping homeowners, particularly modest income homeowners, be able to get financing to build ADUs.
I'd like to welcome everybody today to the Construction Lending Podcast. And today we are honored to have Congressman Liccardo with us to discuss his bipartisan efforts to address the critical issues, specifically the bipartisan Housing Supply Act. Congressman Liccardo, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Sean. Good to be with you.
Now, a little bit of background on you. You come from California's 16th Congressional District. That includes Silicon Valley, San Jose, and before being a congressman, you were mayor of San Jose.
Yeah. Bit of the epicenter of the housing crisis, some would say.
Yep. We're just down the way in San Luis Obispo. So my brother lives up in Los Gatos and get to go up there quite a bit.
Well, it's a beautiful part of the country, San Luis Obispo. But I guess like us, you have a bit of a challenge with rents as well.
Yeah, it's I'd say that's an understatement.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for being on the podcast. I know your time is very valuable. So let's dive in. And my first question to you is, from the perspective of Capitol Hill, how is the U.S. doing when it comes to housing? Specifically affordability. Like what grade would you say the U.S. gets for housing affordability right now?
Somewhere between a D and an F. I think most of my residents would lean toward the latter. We're obviously not producing enough housing. With regard to those who critically need affordable housing, as we just look at, for example, a very narrow category of the most extremely low-income residents, we currently serve about 2.3 million families with what we call Section 8 housing vouchers. The number of families that qualify just from income alone would be 4 times that number. And so that's roughly 11 million people we are not serving well. And that's just an extremely low income. That doesn't even talk about what we might call very low income, or moderate income. Everybody's suffering up and down the income chain. But obviously those who are suffering the most are those with the least resources.
Yeah. And as being the former mayor of San Jose, you experienced firsthand, what works, what doesn't work up there when it comes to a housing shortage. Did zoning, any land use changes that you guys applied up there? What were kind of lessons learned from being mayor of San Jose?
Well, 2 things can be true. There's a lot of local restrictions that are inhibiting housing growth, and zoning is, a sore spot, I think, for a lot of local communities. There's no question that the power of NIMBYs has constrained the ability of cities to do what they need to do to accommodate a growing population. And so, we engaged in lots of the familiar reforms. We lifted height restrictions in our downtown, for example. You can now build as high as you can possibly build until you hit the airplanes. We have an airport nearby, so try to avoid those. We enacted a lot of efforts along with the state of California, to enable greater densification on a lot of lots. We try to accelerate processes and reduce fees in different ways. All those things can be true, but fundamentally, cities really need partners at the state and federal level. And for the most part, the federal government has been largely absent for the last, I'd say 4 decades. I mean, we haven't seen any significant changes in federal housing policy in that time. The most significant tool for building affordable housing, the low-income housing tax credit, was created in the mid-'80s. And there's a lot of innovation we critically need at the federal level that could help local communities.
Is there anything that stands out to you that was like the go-to? You pull out your Swiss knife and you're looking through it. Was there a tool in there that you found to be the most effective that you would like to take to Capitol Hill?
Well, we tried a lot of things. Some worked poorly and some worked well. But I think anybody would say, if they honestly look at the 8 years I served, of all the levers we pulled, we didn't tackle our housing crisis by any stretch. We had a crisis when I left office, just like when I went in. And this is a challenge that's much bigger than any one city or any one state even to tackle. We need lots of tools. One tool we used that had some benefit, particularly through the tough times of, the pandemic, when we had a huge drop in housing construction because everything that was going around the pandemic shut down a lot of construction sites. And so we were struggling mightily to find ways both to get multifamily housing financed as well as to even just get construction crews out there. So one area we landed on that actually helped us compensate for an awful lot of the shortfall was what we call ADUs, or accessory dwelling units. They also call them, granny units or backyard homes. We tried some ideas to make it easy on homeowners to be able to get permits. So we went to private sector providers of prefabricated modular backyard homes. We said, look, we will permit or approve your designs in advance. Just go through our planning department early on. We'll put up those designs and plans up on a website. That means homeowners who want to go buy those can get their permit in a day online if they choose from among the roughly 24 that we put up on the website. And what we saw was really transformative. We knew that homeowners were interested in doing this. The number of permits that were issued in 1 year went from about 15, let me give it 2 years, I think, went from roughly 15 to more than 800. So we saw that there was a real spike in interest and there was something there. But then when we look back at those roughly 800 or so permits that got issued a couple of years later, we found that a lot of those homeowners weren't actually building the units. They had the permits, but they couldn't get financing to build. And so it became very apparent to me we had a larger problem around financing that we needed to find a way to fix. And after a lot of conversations with banks and lenders, I came to the conclusion that as mayor, you do not have control of everything. This was something that was above our pay scale.
You remove one barrier and another barrier becomes, evident that, hey, we moved the ball along, but not quite all the way.
Yeah, and then that's kind of the work of mayors, right? I mean, you do everything you can to try to remove red tape and push, but there's always other barriers. So you make the progress you can. So we did notice that backyard homes and ADUs became a growing source of new housing in the city, particularly as other sources were declining, particularly multifamily housing. At one point, we have a third of our units were actually ADUs 1 year during that recession when things were tough. Now we're seeing throughout California, about 1 out of every 5 new units is an ADU. So we know this is a significant potential source of new housing. It could be even more significant if we could get these barriers out of the way. And what I mean by the financing barriers is, if you're a wealthy homeowner, you got enough equity in the home, you can go get, either use cash, right? If you're wealthy enough, or you go get an equity line, and with the equity you have in your home, you can go build whatever you want in your backyard. That's just not true for modest income homeowners who came in recently. In fact, the very homeowners who would want to have a renter the most to help them pay their mortgage are the very homeowners who don't have access to the resources to build an ADU. And so this is really the crux of the challenge that I saw, which gave rise to the need to put together something at the federal level when I got here.
Yeah, now this is what I really like and why we're here. But you and Representative Garabino recently introduced a bipartisan Housing Supply Act. Can you walk me through and our listeners what the core components are to the bill and what it aims to achieve?
Yeah, and this is something that kind of came up through a lot of conversations I was having back then when I was mayor, and then when I was running for office. I actually put together a book of ideas that I thought Republicans and Democrats would actually agree on to tackle our biggest challenges. And of course, housing by far among the largest. And so this idea is, we've got to get Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac into the game of helping homeowners, particularly modest income homeowners, be able to get financing to build ADUs. And they weren't in the game. We talked to lots of lenders who said they weren't going to get into lending in this space for lots of reasons I won't bore you with. But by ensuring that we could get Freddie and Fannie to back them, the second mortgages, that was very helpful to persuade lenders to tell me, hey, if you can get them in, we'd be in too. And basically, what Fannie and Freddie do, of course, is they purchase these mortgages and package them, securitize them, then sell them on a secondary market. That reduces certainly interest rates for lots of borrowers. It also provides safety for those lenders because they no longer have that asset on their books. It's now securitized on Fannie and Freddie's books. So, and they obviously have a much larger market to go sell to with the securitized debt. So this is obviously the mechanism that has enabled tens of millions of homeowners to become homeowners, including myself. It's worked in other contexts. It needs to work for second mortgages in this context. We also, another part of this bill would get the FHA involved in insuring those mortgages, obviously with a fee. That is also very helpful.
Yeah, every one of our listeners' ears are all perking up now. As soon as you mentioned Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, and a completely new mortgage product that they would be able to turn around and sell or have insured. Is this just limited to ADUs right now? Like, is this, primarily focused on ADUs for this second mortgage per se that they would be purchasing?
Yes. And, there's a whole big question about what Fannie and Freddie, what may become of those entities, right, through this administration. Happy to talk about that as well. But really, it is focused on backyard homes. There's some particular provisions that help make this financing more feasible. For example, it requires lenders to consider 50% of estimated rental income from these units when considering, how and whether to offer financing, and also the increased valuation of the property when you complete the construction, which a lot of lenders were not allowed to consider in making their lending decision. So, these are obviously realistic elements that should be part of the lending decision, but because of, how lenders view risk in the market and so forth, have not traditionally been included.
Yeah, no, absolutely huge to be able to count the rental income, the proposed rental income into the mortgage calculations. I think that's, very, very necessary. It's going to be one of those barriers that, hey, you get it there and then you don't have that. It's like, then it doesn't take off. But so far, it sounds like everything's aligning for it. What are critics saying? Let's look at the other side of this. Are you getting any criticism on the bill yet?
Well, I think a fair criticism is, hey, we've got these big plans for Fannie and Freddie, and we don't even know if Fannie and Freddie are going to exist in their current forms. Well, obviously they'll exist, but in what form they'll exist, 4 or 5 years from now, based on what the Trump administration is proposing to do, in essentially.
Not a lot of details yet.
The federal, I don't want to speak for the Trump administration. I never will, but essentially altering the relationship with the federal government and its sponsorship, taking them out of bankruptcy and then going out to public markets with their equity. There's a lot of skeptics about whether or not that can be done quickly or at all. But, I think it's fair to say it's going to take a considerable number of years. In the meantime, we ought to be using these entities for their design purpose, which is to help more folks get access to housing in a stable and well-regulated market.
Yeah, well agreed. Now, as we look forward, say 5 years down the road, and say it passes both sides, president signs it into law. We're all excited. Fannie, Freddie, FHA. It may take them a little while to get the guidelines out and actually start the machine of purchasing these mortgages or insuring them. What does success look like? How do we know that? That we've won this battle?
Yeah, we know that not every local jurisdiction's enthusiastic about ADUs, right? These are the fights, in every neighborhood, every NIMBY group, and et cetera. But we know that in those cities that are enthusiastic, and states, and you look at California, of course, there's great upside. And if you look at, for example, the city of Vancouver in Canada, nearly 1/3, I think it's 32% of their single family parcels have an ADU on them. So you could do the math, and if you considered a suburban community in a state like California that has a lot of single family parcels, frankly, any city in California outside of San Francisco has a lot of single family parcels. You could see how transformative this could be for supply. Now, obviously, it doesn't scale in the same way that building a 300-unit apartment does. But it scales in a way that does not directly involve the federal treasury and taxpayers. Mm-hmm. We can debate Fannie and Freddie and whether or not they're good for the taxpayers or not. I think for the most part they are. But for the most part, the taxpayers won't be on the hook for the creation of what could be tens of thousands of units of affordable housing, naturally affordable housing, because we know it's likely to rent at less than market if it's in somebody's backyard. This is an extraordinary opportunity for us, leveraging essentially the private market. That is the individual will of homeowners who want to have homes.
Now, this is so great, so important. The fact that the taxpayer doesn't have to pick up the bill at the end of the day is even, it's like whipped cream on top. What are the next steps? For the listeners out there, what are the next steps that we're going to see, happen with this bill?
Well, we've got a few Republicans on the bill. We could certainly use more. So if any listeners happen to live in districts where they're represented by a Republican, as you all know, Republicans run both the House and the Senate. So the way it works, we're a majoritarian enterprise here in Congress. We need more Republicans so we can convince Republicans this bill needs to move. We've got 5 on board now, and I'm grateful to them. So anyway, folks are interested in this, please do mention your member of Congress. Get on this bill. It's called the Supply Act. What we're hoping is that this bill will become married with a larger Republican bill. It's likely to move through the House in the fall, perhaps the winter, and then we can get this thing to the floor for a vote. It is possible it could move individually as well, and we're still sorting all that out. Because I'm, a first-term member of the minority party, or what some biologists would call the lowest form of human life in Washington, D.C., I need to depend on others. The chairperson of the committee and the subcommittee chair are Republicans. So obviously, we'll continue to work collaboratively with them to see how we can get this bill moving. And I think they're likely to support it, but I don't want to speak for them.
No, that's great. And I hope our listeners pick up their phone and make those calls. And I know your time's really valuable, but we end every podcast. I think we got 3 minutes here before we got to let you go. But we do a rapid fire session here at the end.
Okay, here we go.
You're not our typical listener of the podcast, but we just fire off a couple questions at you, and I hope you're willing to participate.
I'm ready.
All right, first one: have you ever built your own home?
No.
Would you ever want to build your own home with a construction loan?
No.
Okay. Well, that's fair.
I'm terrified of construction as a mayor. I've been through so many of our developers' disasters that I understand something about the risks.
Very fair. Our audience is a group of construction lenders, so I get a wide range of responses on that.
I admire the courage for everybody in the industry.
Next question. Recent book or movie you've come across that you thought was great? Something on Netflix or?
Yeah, Sapiens by Hariri. It's a fantastic book about human beings in a way that we never imagined.
All right, I got to check that one out. And last question here, I promise. If you can change one law, what would it be? It's a tough one.
That is a very long list, but since we're on housing, let me just offer one. I'd quadruple the number of Section 8 housing vouchers so we could really start to tackle this homelessness crisis.
That's great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on the podcast, Congressman. If people wanted to get in touch with you or people in your office, what's the best way for them to do that?
Thanks, Sean. You can go online, check us out. Just write Sam Liccardo Congress. That'll get you to our office website, and you can send us messages through that, and also set up appointments and calls and all those things.
This is
Oh, I'm
fantastic.
sorry. We're on social media too. I'm being told. Okay, I'm being prompted by our people that please do follow us on social media. And Izzy, how exactly can people best do that? They can go on the website, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you can sign up for our social media on our website and follow us, and hopefully give me an occasional thumbs up.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you very much for being on the podcast. I wish you the best of luck with the bill. We're going to be following it ourselves. It sounds like it can make a big impact. But again, thank you so much, and good luck with your time there in Washington.
Yeah, well, hopefully working together, we can all help make home owners, home providers. And that could do a lot for our country.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Take care, Sean.
This podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only and does not replace independent professional judgment. Land Gorilla Inc. makes no representations, warranties, or promises for and disclaims any express or implied warranties related to content. Before acting on any information, you should consider the appropriateness of the information as it pertains to your unique business needs.